Hi everyone, good evening, and welcome to the first My AS My Life Facebook Live of 2022. For anyone who's not joined us before, my name is Zoe Clark. I'm Senior Self-Management Programme Officer here at NASS, and today I'm joined by Jackie Bond, who's an Alexander teacher. Hi Jackie, how are you?
Hello there, I'm very well, thank you.
Thank you so much for joining us this evening and kicking off this year's Facebook Lives. Really excited about this session, and we've had quite a few comments already as well.
Brilliant.
So for everyone who's joining us live, we'll be having a little chat to begin with about the Alexander technique and discussing sort of what it involves. And then Jackie will be doing a demonstration as well. So if you'd like to get involved and take part live, then just make sure you've got a sturdy chair with you and a bit of space around you as well. But as always, the video will stay on our page afterwards, so you can catch up afterwards and try out the movements anytime. And if you're joining us live, then just drop a message in the comment box, say hi, and pop any questions for Jackie in there as well, because we'll have time at the end for a few questions too. So before we get started, Jackie, do you want to tell us a little bit about yourself?
Yes, I've been teaching the Alexander technique now for over 25 years. I can't believe it's been that long, but a big change from banking, which is I was originally, that was my profession. And it's much more satisfying. I've taught all manner of age ranges, workshops, groups, both home and abroad, and with a broad range of different issues from, sort of poor posture, pain-related musculoskeletal issues, right through to those that perform. I love what I do. I've got my own complementary therapy practice in Basingstoke, which now I've added massage, nutrition and a whole host of things, so I can provide a sort of an all-over holistic approach to people's pain, injury and overall health.
That's fantastic. That sounds really rewarding as well. And I know we were put in touch with one of our NASS followers who has AS, who has sessions with you, doesn't she?
Yes.
Yes, that's
yes.
Yeah, really good.
And I think she'll be watching today. So if she is, hello Caroline.
Oh, brilliant. Yeah, I can see we've got lots of people joining us live. So hi everyone, thank you so much for joining us. So yeah, really nice to see lots of you joining us for our first session. So for everyone who's just joined, as I said at the beginning, we'll have a chat to begin with just about introducing the Alexander technique for anyone who's unfamiliar with it. And then Jackie will be doing a quick demo which you can join in with. So if you'd like to join in, then make sure you've got a sturdy chair and a bit of space around you. And do pop any questions for Jackie in the comments, because we'll come back to those in the Q&A at the end as well. So yeah, to begin with, Jackie, do you want to tell us a little bit about what the Alexander technique is?
Yes, people have heard of physio, chiropractic, osteopathy, but although the technique has been around for well over 100 years, it's still not very well known. And if people do know a little bit about it, it's generally, well, it's about posture, it's about those tend to be the two things that people think about it. But it's sort of, well, I would say it's beneficial for practically anything. It's all encompassing, and it's really about changing poor postural habits. And that's the big thing, is that we've got habits that have been built up over very many years, fine as babies and toddlers, mostly, unless there are particular, obviously, conditions problematic then. But then we copy our parents. So we blame our parents for a lot of things. We can blame them for our poor posture as well, because we copy what we see there. And then, and so much more so nowadays, we're sat in front of computers, in front of desks, collapsing forwards. This carries on from school to university to our work. Then we start fixing, and we don't realise what we're doing. So if we've been doing this for a long time, this just gets to feel quite normal and quite natural. And then we don't realise that's causing an awful lot of tension. That will be fixing the shoulders. That will lead to pain and possibly, sort of other issues and injury. And it's at that stage then that I tend to get people coming along to me. They might have seen a physio or a chiropractic practitioner or an osteopath, or had massage. And it's very much, okay, well, all those things are great, but if you've got poor posture when you're sedentary, so if you're stuck in front of a chair like this, then it's going to be good to get all the endorphins moving, and you will actually, get some benefit from moving. But if you're using the same habits to do your exercise and more active things, then at some point you're going to be putting those habits into those movements, and it won't necessarily improve anything. So really what we're doing is we're saying to people, right, let's have a look at and see what habits that you've got that are possibly causing the issues that you've got, and then we'll go through a series of instruction and procedures, verbally and with hands-on, to make you aware of those habits so that you can learn over a period of time how to change those.
That sounds fascinating, and certainly I could relate to what you said about working at a desk and having that not so perfect posture, particularly working from home at the moment, like I imagine lots of people are still doing as well. So it'll be really interesting to see how people find the demo and how beneficial it is for everyone.
Yeah, sure.
And I'm interested to know why it's called the Alexander technique. Where did the name come from?
Well, it comes from the man who devised it, I suppose. He was an Australian, Frederick Matthias Alexander. So he was born in 1869, and he wanted to become a well-known Shakespearean actor. And the problem was he kept losing his voice. So not a terribly good thing for anyone to do, let alone someone who's in that kind of profession. And he couldn't work out what the problem was. And he spent literally years in front of mirrors. So he had a lot of perseverance and a lot of awareness, observing what he was doing when he was reciting and learning the problems and the habits that he was having and how to actually stop that. And although it took him a very long time, and it does take us a long time, it's really quite simple. He had certain habits that he was doing. He found that if he could put a wedge or a space or a gap in between the thought and the action, then he could prevent his habits from kicking straight in, and that he could consciously decide how he wanted to move, to speak. And that is really what we teach today. So it is very simple, but as anyone who has, especially this time of year, decided that they've eaten too much, put on a few pounds, wants to take that off again, and it's very easy to put the weight on. It's obviously very difficult to take it off and keep it off, and it's the same with the technique. So he found that, as I say, putting this wedge in was one thing, and then there was the really important thing was what he did with his head. Which I'll explain in a little bit. And it's really important about what you do with your head, where you wear your head, and how that relates to your neck and the rest of the spine. And that's another thing. This head, neck, back relationship or balance is very important as well.
Okay, that's really interesting as well, in terms of, for many people watching, if they've got axial SpA, a lot of emphasis we put on with the exercises is making sure we keep the head posture as strong as we can. So in terms of the Alexander technique, why is the head so important? Okay,
well, I have a spare head here. I hope I can show you. I take this round to a lot of demos. You can see it's an old-fashioned one because it is a metal one. This is my second head weight. The head of an average adult weighs between 10 and 15 pounds. That's 4 to 6 kilograms. And if I'm sitting or standing or using myself in a way that is doing this all the time, plus gravity, that's putting an awful lot of pressure through my head into my spine. That's going to affect my musculoskeletal system, neck, back, shoulders. It's also going to affect my breathing. It's going to affect my circulation. It's actually going to make me look an awful lot older as well, because I'm going to be pulling down. And that's what we associate with older people, is the fact that they're collapsed and they're forward. And I do quite a lot of work with those that have Parkinson's, and one of the big problems that they have is this forward head carriage. It's a lot more difficult with them than for others, but if I think we can prevent that with most of us, what we want to try and do is remember that we don't have a joint here, we have a joint here. So the movement from the head should be from that point, not collapsing down. And as we'll look at in the demo, we certainly don't have a joint in the waist. It's the hips. So we're just trying to keep that length between the hips and the head then with whatever we're doing. And that will reduce stress, tension. That can help with fatigue, tiredness and issues like that.
Oh, that sounds really interesting. Yeah, I'm looking forward to seeing the practical side of that as well. And finally, I mean, you've touched on this a little bit already, but how does the Alexander technique work in terms of sort of getting those benefits that you've described?
Yeah, you can get a certain amount out of working with groups, but the ideal situation, as I think with many things, is that it's normally learned on a one-to-one basis. So the people that come to us are called pupils, and we're called teachers rather than practitioners, because we're giving those that come to see us skills that they can take away with them, practice, and then come back, and hopefully there'll be improvement week by week. So we use a combination of hands-on guidance, verbal instruction, and I would say on average between about 6 and 12 lessons will give, or sessions will give someone a very good idea about what it's all about, and to be able to start putting the habits that the new habits that they're learning into everyday practice. And then after that, it would really depend. So I have people that come to see me weekly for a certain amount of time. Then they might reduce to 2 weekly, 3 weekly, 4 weekly. And I've got some lovely students as well who I can't get rid of. So I've been seeing them for years and years. There's nothing really badly wrong now. It's a bit like they like coming back for an MOT. And also I think like massage, unlike massage, we don't need people to remove any clothes. So people remain fully clothed throughout the lesson. It's very gentle, so there's no kind of pulling or pushing or anything like that. There's no oils involved. So people like the fact that they can go away feeling taller, lighter and better just by being very gently moved and manipulated, and by just following instructions.
That sounds fantastic. And it sounds really individualized as well, which I think for people with axial SpA, because everyone's, you know, affected so differently, it sounds really good, but then the actual technique is very individualized as well.
Yes, so it's, although the principle is the same, the way that you know, I would work with, let's say, an 8-year-old that's got low back problem, or an 80-year-old that's suffering with Parkinson's, would be quite different, but the principles behind would be the same.
Oh, excellent. I can see we've got lots of people joining us. No questions so far, so everyone's taking it in. So for everyone who's joining us, please do pop any questions for Jackie in the comments. And I think you're going to take over to do a little demo now, unless there's anything else you wanted to add before getting started.
No, I don't think so. Before I go into the demo, what I'm going to be looking at is just a few very simple, ordinary, everyday movements, because it's not about particular exercises or a particular regime. So there's no numbers of repetitions that you've got to do. There's no contortions that anyone has to get into. As nice as things like yoga are, it can be quite difficult to do. This is looking at how we stand, how we sit down, stand up, how we walk. And one of the things that's quite interesting is the way that I will be showing people how to stand and sit today. There have been studies done, and looking at the way we sit and stand can save you between 20 and 50% more energy. So for anyone whose pain then means that they're suffering chronic tiredness or fatigue, this can be really good in the way that you use your body in saving so much more energy. So if you're using yourself in a way that is freer and lighter, less stress, less tension, less effort, then you're going to have a little bit more energy, perhaps for the things that you would like to do, rather than collapsing in the chair at the end of the day and thinking, right, I've had enough and I can't do any more.
I have to say, probably almost all of our listeners will have been delighted to have heard that. Anything we can do to save a little bit of energy when living with axial SpA is a lifesaver. Absolutely.
Absolutely.
That sounds fantastic. I mean, before we get started, we have had a question from Kathy just asking if there's what's the best way of finding a practitioner in her area?
Okay, there is probably the best way is the Society for Teachers of the Alexander Technique. So that is www.stat.org.uk, and all the teachers on that list will have had a 3-year full-time training course. They'll be fully certified and insured. And if you go in, I think you can put your postcode in, and that will bring a practitioner up closest to you. For anyone in the sort of in our area, the southeast, going down towards Devon. If anyone's got any, or wants to know of any teachers that I can perhaps personally recommend close in and around our area, then I'm quite happy to do that.
Oh, wonderful, thank you. And we've popped your email address and your website in the video description as well, so everyone can contact you via the website or via your email there.
Yeah, if there's any questions afterwards of any sort with regards to either sessions, what it involves, or teachers, then yes, I'm quite happy to answer any questions via the email, and do have a look on my website, because that will give you more information as well.
Wonderful, thank you. Lovely. So I think I'll hand over to you for the demo, and then yeah, as I said to everyone watching, please do pop any questions in the comments, and we'll make sure we go through them in a Q&A at the end as well. So and it'll be great as well for anyone who's joining in live. Let us know afterwards how it felt and how you experienced it as well. It'll be great to see how you all found it.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. So I just hope I can get all this set up okay.
I'll hand over to you, but I'll be here in the background if there are any issues. So I'll switch off my camera and microphone for now, and then I'll see you in a few minutes.
Okay, that's great.
Thank you.
Okay, so the first thing that we're going to have a look at is standing. Very simple, something that we've all got to do, but we can do it in a more balanced way, or we can do it with an awful lot of tension. And I think a lot of people, out of habit, tend to lock their knees back. If you lock your knees back when you're standing, there is a tendency to let the pelvis sway forwards. As you can see, what that's doing, that's putting a little bit of stress and strain in my lower back, and it will also tighten my glutes and my hamstrings in a way that I don't really want. And if I happen to be tall as well, there is also a tendency to drop forward like that. Now, I've had people come to me with low back pain that very simply making sure that they're standing without locking their knees has made a huge difference. So a very, very simple tip: when you're standing, try and get your weight evenly on both feet. Make sure that you're not locking your knees back. Try and get your pelvis into a neutral position, and with the old sort of deportment thing is think up from the crown. Then you're in a good sort of position to carry on from that for walking. So that is simply standing. Next thing that we all do every day, we stand up and we sit down on a variety of different chairs. Now, I have got here what's called a wave stool. I use this for my computer work. It doesn't have arms, it doesn't have a back, so it encourages me to sit as well as I possibly can. And ideally, when I sit down, I don't want to be doing any bottom searching, because that's going to, again, affect my lower back. Nor do I want to be poking my head forwards. I call this a chicken impression. That tightens the neck, inhibits the neck reflexes, and it will actually help to compress the whole spine. Ideally, what I want to be doing is I just bend my knees, and for ladies in particular, just think of tracking the knees forwards so that we're not bringing them in, because as soon as, if I turn it down, chair around, as soon as I bring my knees in and start to do that, I'm going to plop and fall. Okay, I want to keep my knees going straight forwards and up. If I turn the chair now round to the side, very simply, soft knees as with standing, and then I let the knees go forward. I send my bottom back. I'm keeping what we call this head-neck-back relationship nice and long, and then I just keep bending my knees until I reach the chair. And then I'm in a nice balanced position. With this, it's quite nice because I can actually rock on my on this chair. And also, when you're sat, you want to feel your sitting bones. If I do that, I'm rolling back off my sitting bones. It might feel incredibly comfortable, but you can see what it's doing to my back. It's also not very good for my breathing, nor my digestion, and nor my circulation. If I do the opposite, which is quite common in front of a computer, is I'm doing something like this. So there I'm overarching my back. I'm actually sitting on my thighs, and I'm probably going to be pulling my head back. What I want to try and avoid is doing this when I'm moving, because if we go back to the tin, my head weighs about 10 pounds. Men's heads are generally heavier, not because they have got larger brains, but because basically they have more bone and more fluid. And if I'm doing this every time I stand up and sit down, that's like being hit from behind in a car and having a whiplash injury. Not quite as dangerous, but it's that great amount of weight and pressure that's going forwards and back every time I sit and stand. And if you're doing that 20, 30, 40 times a day, it's a lot of tension and a lot of effort. So all I need to do to stand is literally, I send my head forwards. I have a hinge joint here at the hips, not at the waist. So I hinge forward from the hips until my weight is over my legs. And then all I do simply is straighten my legs to come up to standing. So if I do that both ways now, just to show you. So for sitting, I'm going to think up first of all. I'm going to let my knees remain nice and soft. The weight even on both feet, and I'm looking forwards. I'm going to bend my knees, fold forwards, reach the seat. Just find a position, because we wouldn't be sat, bolt upright in lots of seats, but push yourself back so you have got your back supported if needs be. And then to stand, I'm just going to go forward, transfer my weight and up. What we want to try and avoid, the knees coming in particular, because that tightens the hips. What I call this chicken impression, when I'm pushing my head forwards and backwards. I also don't need to use my arms and shoulders to stand. So I don't need to be doing something like this to stand up or to sit down. Let my arms hang either outside or forwards, and with head going upwards, it is literally just forwards and up. And what will help you keep that balance as well is make sure that your eyes aren't fixing ahead. So that as you go forwards, you're looking towards the floor, and then as you come up, that's when your eyes come up as well with your head level. So simply from forward, it's just that. So that's, you can apply whether it is a low stool, whether it's a high stool, or whether it's any type of chair or sofa. Principle is exactly the same. Now, another thing that we all need to do, whether it's taking washing out of the machine, whether it's washing up, whether it's clearing leaves, whether it's picking up a child, is we need to bend. And again, what we need to do with that is we need to make sure that we're using our hips and our knees. So that when I'm bending, it is that position. Alexander called this the monkey position, I think for obvious reasons. But it's keeping that alignment again there and bending your knees. It's also very good for the legs, and it also takes the strain away from the lower back. So it releases the glutes, the hamstrings, and also the quads. So this is a great teeth cleaning position. So if I'm here, that's a much better thing to do than standing in front of the basin and doing something like that. If I'm working at a lower level, or gardening, for instance, I can get down a little bit lower. So all of that is bending, squatting, kneeling. Again, it's all going to be coming from the hips and from the knees. The more that I can think up from the top, then the less downward pressure there's going to be, and the easier it's going to be for me in movement, and the less fatigue and strain. And then finally, one thing I'm not going to show practically, but this is what we call the semi-supine position. So it's just simply lying down on your back with your head supported by some books, so that it keeps your head level with your spine, and your knees bent, because this takes the pressure away from the lower back. This is an absolutely brilliant position if you've got pain in your shoulders, neck, back, if you need a recharge of your batteries, if you just want to take some time out. 5 or 10 minutes a day, all my pupils, I will say, this is the best thing that you can possibly do on a daily basis. You only have to find a bit of space, fairly thick, warm carpet, little bit, a book, take 5 or 10 minutes, and you've got a good recharge, because instead of your head being on the top of your spine here, you're changing that, so you're lying down, and this is encouraging all of this area to decompress rather than to compress, so that the vertebra can be allowed a little bit of space. All these discs can reabsorb fluid that has been squeezed out through the day, and you're giving yourself a good treat as well. So there's 4 things there, with a few little tips. So standing, basically, don't lock your knees. If you do have a tendency to have low back pain, that's one of the big things I find that helps with people. Sitting and standing, you don't need to use your hands or your shoulders. Make sure your legs are working in such a way that you're using your knees and your hips, and you're keeping this head, neck, back balance as well as you can. Bending, again, where from? Make sure that you're bending from your hips, not your waist. And the other pivot point is here. So we're not bending forwards from here. We're actually bending, we've got pivot point where the head meets the top of the spine, and the other one is the hip joint. And then the semi-supine is just a lovely break, relaxation, and really letting go. So those are the things that I would suggest would be a good thing to start with. And basically the procedure is, we need to be aware of what it is we're doing and maybe what we want to change. And then think, just put a little bit of a pause in between what do I want to do and then actually doing it. That gives you a chance then not to do it habitually, but for you to do it in a much more conscious way and think about how you're doing things. Too fast and you'll revert to your old habits. And for those of you that are old enough to remember this group, I think I love this quote, is that it's not what you do, it's the way that you do it. And you'll get more results from that than anything else. And I think that was Banana Rama. So that's all I have to say with regards to the demonstration. I hope that's been of benefit. And if you have any questions, then obviously please do email me. And I'm quite happy to answer any questions about anything that we've done or anything that might help you specifically with whatever issues you have.
That was wonderful. Thank you, Jackie. There were some really great practical tips there. And I'm going to have that song in my head for the rest of the evening now, as many people watching may do. And hi to Talia, who's just commented, who's joining us. She might be singing that around the house later. Yeah, we've had a couple of questions in, and lots of people joining in as well. So if anyone's just tuning in now, the video will stay on our page afterwards, so you can come back and watch again, learn a little bit more about what the Alexander technique is, and then try out those movements again as well. And if you wanted to, you can pause and try the movements and do it in your own time. I mean, first question, cheekily, I'm going to ask one for myself. I imagine that this does take a bit of practice certainly in remembering to do that sort of pausing before you move. Is there any kind of practical tips you can give in kind of reminding yourself to do that? Is it something like, I can imagine maybe a post-it note on your computer screen or something like that? Any other tips?
Yeah, I would avoid the knotted handkerchiefs, because you invariably forget what the knot was for. But yeah, I think one of the most common one is, I do have people and they will write on post-it notes, and I had one lady and she had them on her fridge, bend your knees. She would have them on, her top drawers, go up onto your toes, in the chair or near the chair, or I think for the television, don't poke your head forwards. So she would have all these kind of reminders. I think this is where it becomes very difficult. If you're a very determined person, you might be able to, sort of get a certain amount of benefit from doing it on your own, but invariably it will need at least, I would say, a couple of sessions with a teacher just to kickstart it, because it's the hands-on and it's the sensory sort of change that you need, and you can't get that really on your own, because you'll just revert to your habits. So once you've got that change, I remember someone saying to me, it's a bit like trying to describe the taste of a lemon when you've never had a lemon. Once you've had a lemon, you can say, yes, it's bitter, it's sharp, it's like this, it's like that. So it's a little bit difficult. But having said that, I have had people that have gone away from group workshops where there's been very little hands-on, and they've practiced what we've done and they've gained a lot of benefit from it. But other than the post-it notes, it is just practice and practicing stopping, because I think nowadays we're always busy, 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 and we never actually just stop and think about what we're doing. So for instance, I could think about turning my head to one side. I could kind of do it like that and collapse. Or if I think, okay, let's think up first of all, look ahead, and then just rotate. It's going to be far easier doing that, and it just takes a little bit more time. So I think it's the pause that's the important thing. Awareness, pausing, and then doing.
Absolutely. It is a very difficult thing to do, but I think the more we can slow down and take those pauses, I think that can be really beneficial for so many different things.
Yes.
That's wonderful, thank you. And so I've got a question from Anne, who asks, would this be helpful for someone who has problems with their discs? She said she's particularly waiting for surgery in February and wondered if it would be suitable for her.
Yeah, because it's very gentle and it's not pulling anyone around, and it's looking at movements that you would do anyway. So it wouldn't be, right, you've got to, you know, sort of put your arms around your ears, or, you know, your legs around your ears or something like that. It's very much, okay, let's have a look at how you're walking. Let's have a look at how you're sitting, because presumably, you know, people that have got to that stage that need surgery, they're probably going to be holding or protecting the areas that are hurting anyway. And by protecting, we generally, if we're holding something, we're not going to be using it well, and we're going to be then affecting other areas as well. So if we can get sort of looking at balance, for instance, then that will certainly be very useful. So yes, I think it can, you know, it will help. And there's very few people I haven't been able to help, you know, not to any, we can't say, well, right, 100%, 50%, 80%, but it will be, you know, like a lot of things, you'll get out what you put in, but everything is tailored to the individual, and we'll have a look at all the movements, because I've had, as I say, 8-year-olds to 80-year-olds, and some that have been very creaky and not been able to move very much at all. But it's just the very simple things.
I imagine it's that type of thing that even a small change can have a big impact as well, in terms of, you know, day-to-day life and daily activities as well.
Yes, because I think if you're feeling lighter, less stress, less tension, that has a knock-on effect, not only the physical but the emotional and the mental as well. So where the semi-supine can actually be really good for sort of mental recharge and an emotional recharge as well.
That sounds perfect. We've got a few questions. Hannah asks, what is the best way to sit on the sofa to relax?
Okay, well, I'm not going to say that you've got to sit like I was, because, you know, we're not going to do that. And, you know, people will throw their legs to one side. What I would say is, if you have a lot of pain when you're sitting on your sofa, then try to support your back as much as possible. If it's a couple of cushions, so that you're not collapsing back into it, so that's supportive, that's fine. If you want to put your feet up on a stool or a cushion or something like that, again, that's absolutely fine. There's not really any right or wrong way. It's just trying to keep, I think basics, trying to keep your length as much as you can, so that you're not compressing down, and then use that in whatever seat that you happen to have. Obviously, if it's kind of a bucket seat sofa, because it's an awful, you know, it's very old, then perhaps that's not the best thing. But try and give yourself as much support as you can, whilst not, you know, sort of sitting to attention whilst you're watching your favourite TV show.
Absolutely, it doesn't sound too relaxing if you're too
No,
rigid.
no.
That happy balance. And we've got a question from Matty, who asks, for him, he's found that half of these movements aren't possible because he's lost mobility. I imagine because of his axial SpA. I imagine, is that something that if he was to see an individual Alexander teacher, they might do different movements? You know, obviously this is a taster session, so we've done quite a general one.
No, of course. And yeah, restricted mobility, you know, we would do things. There's a lot you can do actually sat in a chair. So there can be leg movements, there can be arm movements, there can be breathing, because of course if you don't breathe then you can't do anything else. So it's you know, you can do all the basics, head movements, you know, just very, very simple things that will get some movement going. So it doesn't have to be the big standing, sitting, walking. If that's not possible, then there's always going to be something, small arm and hand movements, for instance, you know, elbows, as I said, breathing. So there is always something that can be done. You know, it doesn't matter how small.
Okay, that's really helpful to know. Might be something if I won't get you to agree on camera, but maybe later in the year, if you fancy doing another session, we could always do a seated one or something to show those movements.
Yes.
I won't make you say yes on camera. We've got a lovely comment from Anya who says, thank you, it's really interesting. And she liked you clearly explains all those different movements. And she said, now I just need to remember to do this all the time.
Absolutely. And I always say to people, don't beat yourself up about not doing it. You know, if you do something you think, oh, I've done it wrong again, I would always go and say, great, I've noticed that, you know, because then the more you notice it, the more you're likely to change it. So that's always you know, it's always a good thing. There's never any point beating yourself up about it. And occasionally, you know, we all feel like a good slump. So, but now, thankfully for me, it doesn't feel comfortable. So you'll get to that point where actually doing that won't feel very comfortable and you want to do something different.
Oh, that's really interesting. That's wonderful. Well, I think we've come to the end of the questions so far. So if anyone's got any burning questions for Jackie, please pop them in the comments. If anyone watches this on catch up and adds any comments, I'll keep an eye over the next couple of days and answer any. But also, as Jackie kindly said, you can always email her directly as well to ask as well. We've got a question from Carol. Oh, one I can definitely empathise with. She said, the shape of the seats on the train is so uncomfortable, it makes it impossible to sit well. Any suggestions? Those I found are particularly sort of force you into a slump position.
I know, it's awful. They push your head forwards, don't they? And yeah, I mean, very glib, I'd say don't use the train, but I mean, that is being very, very glib. It's a difficult one. I think really with that, it's just about thinking up as much as you can, and then perhaps, you know, move when you get off the train, you know, before, lie down if you possibly can. But if it's, you know, if that's a journey that you've got to do every day, then you've got to do it. I don't know whether there are any seats on trains now that might be more comfortable than others, but I can remember a 4-hour trip down to Cornwall with my head poking forwards, and in the end I just had to get up and walk around the train. I know that's probably not possible if it's work related, but I would always say just think of lengthening between the joints, so you can still think up even though you're being pushed forwards. You can still think of letting your arms hang. You can still think of your knees releasing out of your hips. So creating this mental space in the joints will have some kind of effect.
That's really helpful. Yeah, certainly I'm not a fan of those seats at all. Let's have a look. Pamela really appreciated your advice on the sofa position as well. And Mattie's asked, can you recommend a movement for getting out of bed, i.e. going from laying to sitting to standing?
Yeah, I would always suggest is that if you're getting up, try and avoid pulling yourself straight forwards, because that will put an awful lot of stress on your neck, and presumably that's not going to be good for most people's backs anyway. But the best way to get out of bed is going to be to roll over onto one side, and then literally use your hands to push yourself up so that you end up sitting on the side of your bed, and then you can move forwards like we did when we were standing up and on from there. So that will obviously depend on the height of the bed and whether she's near a wall or, you know, but I would always say roll over onto one side and then sit yourself up. And with some people that have had real problems with this, maybe they can't or find it very difficult to roll over, is silk or satin sheets, because they're more slippery. That's one thing. And then maybe having you know, something that you can grab hold of that's near you, so that you can actually use that to help pull yourself up if there is a lot of maybe immobility or pain in that respect.
That's really helpful, yeah, because a lot of people with axial SpA, their symptoms are at their worst in the morning. So often it is that once you're up and about, it can feel easier, but it's just getting to that point. So that's a really great practical tip.
And yes, and what I think about that as well is that also because we've been asleep all night, especially if you're on your back, any sort of movement, the muscles have got set overnight. Is one of the things you can do if you're lying on your back is a few pelvic tilts. So just on your back, just get a little bit of the tilt moving forward and backwards. You can always do a side to side one as well. It just gets a little bit of movement going, and it's a bit like putting an oil on a squeaky hinge. And you might find that that will help just get things moving enough. I mean, I have problems with my hands now, so that every morning I'm doing that 10 or 15 times, and lots of other movements, because my hands get very, very stiff. So I think any movement you can do in bed before you start moving to get up can be useful.
Absolutely, yeah, and music to my ears, keeping moving. That's brilliant. So I think we've covered everyone's questions now. I will go through afterwards and just make sure that I've not covered everything. Yeah, Matt says, thanks very much for answering. He said he's got a bed rail that he uses to wrestle himself up on. So that can be really helpful where you've got that to get that sort of hinge movement.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Brilliant. Well, thank you so much, Jackie. It's been really fantastic to get a real taster of the Alexander technique and a really good overview as well. And yeah, so for everyone watching, we've got Jackie's details in the video description, so you can get in contact with her and learn a little bit more about her, and go see her if you're nearby as well. So thank you so much.
That's a pleasure. That's a pleasure. I hope it's been useful. And yeah, as Zoe's just said, if anyone wants to contact me for, sort of any questions surrounding this, then please do.
That's wonderful. Thank you. And thank you for everyone for joining us live as well this evening for our first session of the new year. Just to let everyone know as well, if you've joined partway through, then the video will stay on our page afterwards, and we'll also pop it on our webpage on My AS My Life, so you can catch up afterwards and learn more. And also our next session is going to be on Wednesday next week, the 12th of Jan, 6 p.m. again, and we've got a live yoga session with Jamie Boda from Yoga for AS, and he's going to be doing a session on yoga for fatigue. So hopefully lots of people can join us then or catch up afterwards. And finally, just a little plug for a link that I've popped in the video description for a very quick survey for you to give your thoughts on these Facebook Live sessions. If you've got a couple of minutes, it'll be great to get your thoughts on any sessions you'd like for us to plan for this new year, and any improvements that we can make as well. Wonderful. So thanks again, Jackie, and thank you for everyone watching, and I'll let you all get on with your evenings.
Okay, thanks very much.
Take care and see everyone next week.